The story of SpongeBob is way more complicated than you may think. With over 300 episodes, there's a lot to cover. So in order to help you understand his story better, I'm going to go over every important event within SpongeBob's life which shaped him into who he is, and cover the difficulties of staying positive, even while things are going terribly, because let me tell you, doing that definitely isn't always so easy. So get ready, sit back, grab a snack if you want, and enjoy. What better place to start SpongeBob's story than at the Krusty Krab, which is exactly where the first episode of the show starts everything. It all begins with SpongeBob trying to get a job at the Krusty Krab, which doesn't sit well with the restaurant's cashier and SpongeBob's neighbor, Squidward.
No, SpongeBob.
Go, SpongeBob!
But what if I told you that this actually isn't SpongeBob's first time at the Krusty Krab? In Season 6, Episode 123 to 124, titled Truth or Square, SpongeBob wakes up one morning and realizes that the Krusty Krab is celebrating its 117th anniversary, whatever that's supposed to mean. So he decides to tell his pet snail Gary all about his first visit to the Krusty Krab. During this flashback, we see how SpongeBob fell in love with the Krusty Krab and the Krabby Patty before he was even born. SpongeBob's dad and pregnant mom can be seen approaching the Krusty Krab while searching for a place to eat, and although SpongeBob's dad tried to discourage them from going, saying that the place didn't look like a family restaurant, embryo SpongeBob had other plans.
Well, okay then. What would you like? Krabby Patty!
He ended up loving it so much that he pulled out his mom's umbilical cord and sucked the Krabby Patty straight from the tube. It's clear that it was his destiny to flip patties. However, if we go back to Season 1, Episode 1, titled Help Wanted, we get to see some of the troubles which SpongeBob would have to go through in order to even have a chance at getting the job of his dreams working at the Krusty Krab. In this episode, SpongeBob is getting ready to apply for a job as the fry cook at the Krusty Krab. There's one big problem though, and that problem is himself, as he believes that he's not good enough for the job. So his friend Patrick, being the hype man he is, decides to talk some sense into him.
Who's a big yellow cube with holes?
I am!
Who's ready?
I'm ready!
Although, after finally working up some courage, upon entering the restaurant, SpongeBob is faced with an even bigger problem than himself, as Mr. Krabs doesn't want to hire him. So he gives SpongeBob a seemingly impossible mission, saying he'll hire him if he completes it.
Go out and fetch me a hydrodynamic spatula with, port and starboard attachments and turbo drive.
But just as SpongeBob leaves, Mr. Krabs will soon regret not hiring him.
Anchovies. What? Anchovies!
Mr. Krabs and Squidward are completely overwhelmed by this giant mob of hungry customers. However, SpongeBob suddenly appears with the exact spatula Mr. Krabs sent him to find, and within seconds, he manages to cook up enough Krabby Patties to feed the hungry anchovies. So obviously, SpongeBob gets the job, while Mr. Krabs gets his stack of cash. This event really shows how determined SpongeBob can be when going after something he wants, and how easily he can overcome any challenge while pursuing it. Of course, this was the first time we see SpongeBob saving the day at the Krusty Krab, but how exactly is he so good at flipping patties in the first place anyway? Well, surprisingly, this actually wasn't his first time flipping a patty. The first time we get to see SpongeBob behind the grill was during a flashback in Season 5, Episode 81, titled Friend or Foe. In this episode, Patchy the Pirate and Potty the Parrot show us SpongeBob making his first patty as a baby. Not surprisingly, it was absolutely perfect. I guess it now makes sense how SpongeBob was able to feed all those anchovies, as he's been doing this for quite some time. This is one of the very few times we get to see SpongeBob as a child, and it almost looks like he had a perfect childhood. But what if I told you that his childhood actually wasn't as perfect as it may seem? We see some examples of this in Season 5, Episode 93C, titled Blackjack. SpongeBob is going through his mail when he suddenly finds mail from his cousin Blackjack, revealing that he's out of prison and is currently visiting SpongeBob's parents. From the way the letter is written, it looks like Blackjack has kidnapped SpongeBob's parents, and this is when we get to see that SpongeBob was bullied by Blackjack as a kid.
Ha ha ha! Come on, little man. Let's go a couple of rounds. If you think you're tough.
Since SpongeBob was rather small and weak, he couldn't defend himself from his much stronger and older cousin, so understandably, he's scared that Blackjack will hurt him again, just like he used to, and maybe even hurt his parents, since he has apparently kidnapped them. So SpongeBob then spends the rest of the episode trying to get help from his family to rescue his parents, but it seems he's out of luck, and will have to face Blackjack on his own. However, when going to do this, SpongeBob finds out that Blackjack has actually given up on his old ways, and the reason he's at his parents' house is because they were hosting a party to celebrate his release from prison. Even though Blackjack still wants to wrestle with SpongeBob, it's revealed that he's actually very tiny, as he never grew up after their childhood. And to think SpongeBob was once scared of this guy. However, while Blackjack may have made SpongeBob's childhood miserable, you'll realize that at least SpongeBob was never alone through all these difficult experiences of his. Although SpongeBob is an only child, as there's no mention of any siblings throughout the series, his best friend Patrick has been by his side since they were both kids. Now, although Patrick may be the laziest and probably the dumbest citizen of Bikini Bottom, to SpongeBob, he is the best friend any sponge could ever ask for. And the two of them are practically glued to each other in almost every single episode.
Where's your best friend now, SpongeBob?
Well, according to this t-shirt, it says my best friend is right here.
I mean, they do go very far back together, which is shown in Season 2, Episode 35A, titled The Secret Box. The episode starts with SpongeBob going over to Patrick's house to invite him to go jellyfishing. But when Patrick shows up, he's carrying a secret box which he doesn't want to show SpongeBob. Of course, SpongeBob is very curious and keeps trying to convince Patrick to show him what's inside the box by doing things like telling him his own most personal secrets. But when Patrick refuses yet again, SpongeBob decides to steal the box and run away with it, making Patrick very mad.
Listen up, SpongeBob Secret Stealer Pants. If you ever come near my secret box again, we won't be friends anymore!
While all of this is going on, SpongeBob has a flashback of him and Patrick playing at the nursery as babies and riding a bike together when they were children. This is proof that they became friends at a very young age. As well, there's even a whole different plot in the SpongeBob movie released in 2020 that tries to explain how SpongeBob and Patrick first met. At a part in the movie, Patrick takes us on a flashback to the first moment he met SpongeBob at Camp Coral while they were babies. SpongeBob had just arrived at the summer camp when he found Patrick all alone crying his heart out because he was missing home. And just like that, a wonderful friendship was born, one that would last forever and ever.
It's the best friends forever! Best friends forever! Ring!
It's a bit of a confusing part of SpongeBob's story, but since that movie isn't canon, we'll just ignore that plot and conclude that SpongeBob and Patrick met at some point as babies. And their bond only goes even deeper than that, because in a later episode, we find out that even SpongeBob and Patrick's ancestors have always been friends since the dawn of time. But we'll get into that more later in the video. Anyway, Patrick isn't SpongeBob's only good friend actually. Located on the edge of Bikini Bottom lies a glass dome, where a squirrel and her acorn tree live. This is Sandy Cheeks, a squirrel who somehow found her way underwater, and now dresses up in a spacesuit thingy so she can hang out with aquatic animals. I'm not really sure how that works, but it just works, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, is this even as weird as rain falling underwater?
Rain? But we're underwater!
Or even fire burning underwater? Anyway, the first episode of the first season is when SpongeBob first meets Sandy. That's a lot of firsts. Their first meeting is pretty strange, to say the least. At the start of the episode, we see SpongeBob jellyfishing, when suddenly he sees a land squirrel in the distance, fighting a clam. Seeing that the squirrel might be in danger, he attempts to save her. However, not only did Sandy end up saving herself from the clam, but she also had to save her so-called hero from getting eaten as well. Sure, SpongeBob may not be a hero, but at least he knows a thing or two about making new friends. So it didn't take long for him and Sandy to start bonding. Although in an attempt to try and fit in with her, SpongeBob tells Sandy that he also likes air, even though he has no idea what it is, since he's lived underwater all his life. And when SpongeBob and Patrick show up at Sandy's tree dome for tea and cookies the next day, they get to see just how dangerous air can be for them.
There's no water in here. I tried to tell you. We gotta get out of here. You're doing it wrong. Wait, no.
Lucky for them, Sandy quickly brings out her water hose, saving the two friends after they've completely dried up. After all this, over the years, the bond between SpongeBob and Sandy only grows stronger and stronger, which is why it's quite shocking when one day Sandy suddenly seems to totally forget who SpongeBob even is. For SpongeBob, SquarePants isn't just a name, it's an identity. So much so that he seemingly loses all his friends after a slight wardrobe change. Now, you're probably wondering why SpongeBob would even need to change his wardrobe in the first place. Well, in Season 6, Episode 116B, titled To SquarePants or Not to SquarePants, SpongeBob is doing doing his laundry when he gets distracted by Patrick. And by the time he returns to his laundry machine, his pants have shrunk. So he goes to get new ones at the store, only to find out that the store has been out of SquarePants for months. After trying out some other types of pants, he finally settles for a pair of round pants, which look just like his usual square ones. However, little did SpongeBob know that as soon as he would walk out of the store in this new pair of pants, his life would begin to fall apart. First, it's Patrick who doesn't recognize him because of his new pants, and then Sandy comes along as well, pretending not to know him. Even Squidward pretends to not recognize SpongeBob, although he was only trying to get SpongeBob to leave him alone. Because of all this, SpongeBob heads home sad to his pineapple, only to meet Patrick at the door, refusing to allow him to enter. That's because the house belongs to SpongeBob SquarePants, not Round Pants. At this point, SpongeBob is genuinely convinced that Patrick, Sandy, and Squidward all for real didn't recognize him, so he decides to change his name to SpongeBob Round Pants. The only person who doesn't play along with this whole thing is Mr. Krabs, and he suggests to SpongeBob that he should remove his pants in order to solve this identity crisis of his. So he does just that, and doing this only earns him yet another name.
Well, if it isn't SpongeBob Underpants.
This moment shows us that SpongeBob's identity is completely tied to his square pants, which may be weird, but isn't out of place in the SpongeBob universe, as we already know. While the rejection which SpongeBob faced may have not been all that serious in this particular episode, sadly, this isn't the only time he's been rejected by his friends. And this time around, things get a fair bit more serious. Season 5, episode 98, titled Whatever Happened to SpongeBob, may just be the saddest episode in the entire series. In this episode, SpongeBob starts out his day on a pretty regular note. The only problem is, everything seems to go wrong wherever he goes. From the mailman he greets ending up crashing into a truck, to Gary's shell breaking into pieces after SpongeBob hugs him too hard, and he even accidentally smashes Patrick's cake for his mother's birthday. Nothing is going right for SpongeBob. Yet somehow it only gets even worse when he ruins Squidward's beauty sleep, as usual. As well, he destroys Sandy's robot, and deep fries Mr. Krabs. After every single person he comes in contact with insults him by calling him Idiot Boy.
Idiot boy.
Idiot boy.
Idiot boy!
SpongeBob is left heartbroken. He believes that all his friends now hate him and want him out of town. So he decides to leave Bikini Bottom. Maybe everyone should have been nicer to SpongeBob. I mean, Patrick is much more of an idiot boy than him, and nobody's trying to kick him out. Unfortunately, on his way out of town, our sad Sponge comes face to face with a bunch of scary threats, and while running, he falls off a cliff and bumps his head. Just like that, his memory is completely wiped out. Things aren't looking good.
Isn't this your name?
I don't know, is it?
Eventually, he ends up in a whole new place called New Kelp City, where he defeats a group of bubble-bursting thugs to become the mayor, all while Bikini Bottom burns, due to his absence at the Krusty Krab. When his friends notice he's no longer around, they feel horrible for how they treated him and immediately head to his house, only to find an overfed Gary and a goodbye letter which he left for them. Thankfully, they manage to track him down to the city. But since he's lost all his memories, he can't recognize his friends and refuses to go back to Bikini Bottom with them because he has to attend to his new duties as mayor. As SpongeBob gets into his limo in order to continue with his duties, it's revealed that Squidward hijacked the limo, so he tells everyone else to get in and drives back to Bikini Bottom. Then shortly after, due to some fortunate or unfortunate circumstances, depending on how you look at it, SpongeBob bumps his head once again, and just like that, his memories come back. Moments like this prove that while SpongeBob may look like he's always happy, sometimes he can get sad just like everyone else. You're probably wondering, what else could possibly make SpongeBob sad? Well, another time we get to see this side of him is in Season 2, Episode 28, titled Christmas Who. Let me tell you, this episode definitely even further demonstrates how things aren't always sunshine and rainbows for SpongeBob. It all begins with SpongeBob finding out that Squidward doesn't believe in Santa, just as he finishes writing the last of his Christmas letters to send Santa's way. Of course, SpongeBob can't believe that Squidward isn't excited for Christmas, and in his usual fashion, he decides to force Squidward into the festive spirit. But if you know anything about Squidward, you'll know that this is a complete waste of time. I mean, Squidward is definitely the most depressed character in the whole series.
Here lies Squidward, Squidward's hopes and dreams.
Unfortunately though, Squidward seems to actually be right about Santa not being real, as by Christmas morning, everyone gathers in front of the Christmas tree only to be left in disappointment because Santa hasn't shown up. SpongeBob and Patrick, on the other hand, choose to stay optimistic and convince themselves that Santa stopped for a snack and should be there soon. However, the real reason Santa didn't show up is because he can only come into their homes when they're asleep, and since they stayed up all night waiting for him, there was no way he was coming to Bikini Bottom. After waiting for so long with no sign of Santa, SpongeBob and Patrick conclude that maybe Squidward is right, and that Santa doesn't actually exist. So in one of the rarest occasions ever, SpongeBob becomes extremely sad.
You were right, Squidward. This is a stupid holiday.
Squidward then takes a picture of SpongeBob while he's crying to make fun of him. That's so mean, Squidward. But remember in the secret box episode where Patrick almost ended his friendship with SpongeBob because he didn't want him to see what was in the box? Well, it turns out that the picture taken by Squidward after he saw how sad SpongeBob was is what Patrick was hiding in the box the whole time. What a great friend Patrick is for looking out for SpongeBob like that. Even after being humiliated by Squidward, SpongeBob still gives him a present which he got for him in case Santa didn't bring him anything. This kind act makes Squidward feel really bad, so he decides to do the last thing you'd expect from him, which is dressing up as Santa and surprising SpongeBob, who somehow doesn't recognize him. Although this plan of Squidward's eventually backfires, after everyone in Bikini Bottom shows up at Squidward's door to receive their present, and because of this, he has to give out all of his possessions. Serves you right, Squidward, but at least SpongeBob is now happy. From this episode, we can see how soft-hearted SpongeBob really is, and as impossible as it may sound, his joy even rubbed off on Squidward as well. I mean, who could have imagined that Squidward would choose to give away all his belongings just to make someone else happy? Not me. Speaking of happiness, we all know nothing makes SpongeBob happier than working at the Krusty Krab, but what if I told you that SpongeBob has actually had other jobs? In a spin-off called The Patrick Show, we get to see some parts of the original show from Patrick's perspective. In the first episode, we see SpongeBob before he got his dream job at the Krusty Krab, and let's just say, SpongeBob has tried his hands at a lot of things and failed. First, he and Patrick worked as bag boys at Scuttle and Save, but after they turned the whole store upside down while competing with each other, they got fired. Literally, like out of a cannon.
We completed a job!
They then ended up landing near an old lady's house, and immediately offered to paint her fence. But let's just say, things didn't go according to plan.
This is the way we paint the fence, paint the fence, paint the fence. This is the way we paint the fence for the night away.
Seeing that they had no future in this field, the two friends decided to try working as cab drivers. However, that also didn't work out, and although Patrick never actually got a real job, except for his many brief jobs at the Krusty Krab.
SpongeBob, do we need any more help down at the Krusty Krab?
No.
We do! Great, she can start right away.
Boy, it was sure nice of Mr. Krabs to give me a job.
And at $50 an hour, too. When I started working here, I had to pay Mr. Krabs $100 an hour.
As well as Patrick's job of being SpongeBob's friend, of course. As we know, SpongeBob himself would later find his place behind the grill at the Krusty Krab, full-time, unlike Patrick. And I would say SpongeBob does his job really well. After all, the entire town completely fell apart when he disappeared, as I mentioned earlier. So, you can only imagine what would happen if Bikini Bottom's greatest fry cook forgot how to make a Krabby Patty. Well, in this next episode, exactly just that happens. In Season 1, Episode 6B, titled Pickles, the episode begins with an overweight fish named Bubble Bass walking into the Krusty Krab with a long and complicated order, which SpongeBob quickly assembles. But suddenly, things take a turn for the worse.
Well, Bubble Bass, what do you think?
This is pretty good. Only one thing. You forgot the pickles!
SpongeBob becomes so horrified by this claim that he immediately starts to lose his mind. So much so that he completely forgets how to make a proper Krabby Patty. Pretty strange, right? Surprised by this, Mr. Krabs tells him to go home and get some rest. But SpongeBob can't stop freaking out, since making Krabby Patties is his whole thing. How could he possibly forget how to make a Krabby Patty? Immediately, his whole life starts spiraling downwards due to this. He's missing the door, losing a sense of direction, and can't even sleep on his bed properly. Imagine you're so out of it that your own pet has to correct your sleeping position over and over. SpongeBob is in a slump. By the next morning, SpongeBob is in such a terrible mental state that he can't even make it to work. So Squidward takes his place in the kitchen. Although, that doesn't go so well, as he keeps burning everything, including even a milkshake. Jeez, Squidward, I didn't know this was a high school cooking class. Anyway, it takes 7 days for SpongeBob to finally overcome his mind and remember how to make a Krabby Patty. But just as he returns to the Krusty Krab, Bubble Bass walks in yet again with his usual order. Oh no. After taking a bite of his food, Bubble Bass announces that SpongeBob forgot to add pickles, yet again. What's going on, SpongeBob? Well, it turns out that Bubble Bass had been tricking everyone all along by hiding the pickles under his tongue, just because he didn't want to pay for the food. Come on, man. You put poor SpongeBob through all this stress just to save a couple bucks? Well, at least now SpongeBob is relieved after hearing that he wasn't losing his touch after all. And Bubble Bass is disgraced out of the restaurant. Surprisingly, this actually isn't the only time SpongeBob gets completely screwed over by someone being a cheapskate. If we dig deeper into Season 9, Episode 189 titled SpongeBob You're Fired, this time around SpongeBob's job isn't just on the line, but rather, he actually gets outright fired. All because the cheapskate Mr. Krabs wants to save a nickel.
I've been doing some calculating and, crunching the old numbers, and it turns out that I'll save a whole nickel if I cut your salary.
Even after SpongeBob asks to work for free, Mr. Krabs says this.
Apparently, it's illegal, and I lose my vendor's license, blah, 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 blah.
And then he sends him home instead. Once again, SpongeBob becomes depressed because of this. However, at least maybe Patrick will cheer him up.
Meet me tomorrow morning, and I'll introduce you to the wonders of the unemployed lifestyle.
At first, SpongeBob tries to join Patrick in his unemployed lifestyle, but soon decides to apply for a new job. You're probably wondering what other job could SpongeBob handle? After all, the only thing he knows how to do is flip Krabby Patties. Well, first he tries making hot dogs at Weenie Hut, but ends up making weenie patties instead. So, he tries his hands at making pizza for Pizza Pete, but ends up making pizza patties. Yeah, he really only knows how to make patties, huh? And after getting fired a few more times, while going home depressed, he gets kidnapped by all his former bosses. Since apparently, his new patty ideas actually turned out to be good, which makes you wonder why they even fired him in the first place. Whatever, I guess.
Oh, thank you, Senor Taco. Oh, not you too!
Get him!
After all of this, SpongeBob finally comes face to face with the person who screwed him over to begin with, Mr. Krabs. And he offers him his job back, since the Krusty Krab has been completely falling apart without him. Now to make up for the money which he'll be losing for hiring SpongeBob back, Krabs installs a paid toilet in the restaurant. Classic stingy Mr. Krabs. Can't even let people take a number 2 without milking them for $1. At least these events show how truly important SpongeBob is to Mr. Krabs and his business. Because as we already know, how else would the Krusty Krab run without its trusted fry cook? Yeah, pure chaos. Although this time around Mr. Krabs may have been the cause of SpongeBob walking away from the grill, in this next episode SpongeBob makes the choice all on his own. Most people don't know this, but SpongeBob actually wasn't the first fry cook to work at the Krusty Krab. Way before SpongeBob walked through the glass doors of Krabs' restaurant, there was the original fry cook, Jim. Jim only makes one appearance throughout the series, and that's in Season 5, Episode 82A titled The Original Fry Cook. At the start of the episode, we see Jim pulling up to the Krusty Krab in a golden limousine. In the flashback that follows, Mr. Krabs and Squidward remember when the Krusty Krab had class, Squidward had long hair, and Jim was the fry cook. Obviously, SpongeBob begins to feel insecure about all of this, especially after Jim decides to make the perfect Krabby Patty for old time's sake. After seeing how much better of a fry cook Jim is than himself, SpongeBob decides to quit and give Jim his job back. Maybe SpongeBob just thought Jim would do the job better than him, so he only decided to quit before he would get fired.
SpongeBob!
Don't worry, Mr. Krabs. I was just leaving. I'm not fit to inhabit the same kitchen as Jim. So it is with a heavy heart that I relinquish my position as fry cook.
But just as he's about to leave, Jim informs him that he isn't interested in the job anymore, and that the reason he quit to begin with was because he wanted to pursue bigger things. So lucky for SpongeBob, he keeps his job, and Jim disappears, never to be seen again. Speaking of disappearing, let's talk about the time Squidward literally disappeared from Bikini Bottom just to escape from SpongeBob and Patrick, only to discover one of the oldest secrets about the two of them. If I asked you who the inventor of jellyfishing was, you'd probably say SpongeBob or Patrick, but you'd actually be very, very wrong. The answer to this question lies in Season 1, Episode 14A, titled SB129, when Squidward enters a time machine to travel to a time before SpongeBob was even born. After Squidward arrives at the primordial sea and settles down to play his clarinet in peace, he finds a primitive sponge and starfish hanging out.
What, is it time for your flea bath now? Oh, look, it's just a little jellyfish. Well, I'm going away now.
This is also where we finally see the true origin of SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship, as I mentioned earlier, because we get to see their ancestors being the best of friends. I mean, it just makes sense. SpongeBob and Patrick's friendship is not your regular kind of friendship, so of course their ancestors would have been best friends as well. Anyway, during the same time that Squidward comes across these primitive versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, he shows them how to hunt jellyfish.
This ought to make things go a little smoother.
While the sponge and starfish are distracted by the jellyfish, Squidward decides to play his clarinet. However, Squidward's playing is so bad that it angers the primitive sponge and starfish, so they immediately chase him back to the time machine.
Does this mean you want to go jellyfishing?
No!
It's pretty crazy that Squidward invented one of SpongeBob's favorite activities. But what if I told you that this same activity, jellyfishing, may just be responsible for the end of SpongeBob's life? The series references the future a couple of times across all the seasons, but there's a particular episode that offers an eerie view about what the future holds for SpongeBob. In Season 5, Episode 99B titled SpongeHenge, we see Bikini Bottom being hit by a strong windstorm, which blows into SpongeBob's pores, making a strange kind of music that attracts jellyfish. This would seem like a jellyfisher's dream. Except the next morning as SpongeBob tries to go to work, the jellyfish continue to swarm him, wanting to play. They pursue him all around the Krusty Krab and even Patrick's house. They won't go away, and eventually force him to hide in a cave. While in the cave, SpongeBob decides that he doesn't want to leave it, since he believes that the jellyfish will be waiting outside for him. So he just stays there for some time, long enough to grow a beard. But after enough time, he decides that he'd like to leave the cave. So to keep the jellyfish off his back, he builds several stone replicas of himself. His plan works, and the jellyfish end up surrounding the replicas, and SpongeBob is able to escape the area.
Oh, it actually worked!
But after making his way back to Bikini Bottom, what SpongeBob sees is extremely shocking.
How long was I gone? No!
The Krusty Krab is deserted and sinking into the ground. SpongeBob is the only person left alive. It would seem he spent a very long time stuck inside the cave without realizing it, and things have changed massively. This episode could probably serve as the prediction on how the whole story of SpongeBob ends. Of course, we don't get to see SpongeBob himself die, but with the entirety of Bikini Bottom gone, it looks like it may be the end of his story, especially as the episode ends 3,000 years in the future, with a bunch of aliens checking out the SpongeHenge statues, confused about their origin, which probably means that the Bikini Bottom civilization was wiped out without a trace, and their history totally forgotten, with nothing but these SpongeBob statues which play music in the wind to assist with jellyfish migration left to remember SpongeBob. That kinda sounds like a really sad way to end a life filled with so much joy, but who knows if that's how things really end up going or not. Well, at least SpongeBob would have had a pretty good life before this anyways. So there's that at least. As well, for all we know, he could potentially still be alive, but maybe just not living in Bikini Bottom. Because even though the aliens are shown 3,000 years later, it turns out that yellow sea sponges can actually live for thousands of years. So we can only hope that SpongeBob's still alive, and continuing to live a happy life somewhere else in the sea. Now, if there's anything that we can learn from SpongeBob, it's that we should approach life with simplicity, enthusiasm, and a childlike sense of joy. Often we all go through life on autopilot mode, easily letting our focus be more on the negatives, while taking every single day for granted. But that's not how we are meant to live our lives. And SpongeBob is a perfect example of how we should, as he shows us that even in the worst of circumstances, you can maintain a positive attitude and walk through life like it's a party. As opposed to Squidward, who's always grumpy and sees the glass as half empty, SpongeBob's childlike attitude often shields him from the negative aspects of life and make him view the glass as half full. And although the two of them both basically live the same lives, in the same neighborhood, and even work at the same restaurant, Squidward is always sad and miserable. Yet, SpongeBob on the other hand, is almost always beaming with a smile. You can't control what life throws at you, so the best thing you can do is approach each day with a smile, a positive attitude, and a decision to protect your joy no matter what. Knowing that even when hard times inevitably come, because let me tell you, they will, at least it'll be easier to get through them if you view them positively and as an essential part of your growth, rather than as a limitation. It's all up to you if you want to be like Squidward. Or SpongeBob. If you enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy one of the videos on the screen right now. So go ahead and click one. As well, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I love you and have a good one.